Good day, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of our DAS webinar. This is, for those of you who haven't attended part 1 of this, this is a joint webinar with ESC Spectrum and Trinity Consultants. And I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to attend part 2 of this presentation on the role of the DAS and some best practices. My name is Steve Argabright. I'm a CEMS Specialist and Senior Consultant for Trinity in the DFW area. And joining me again for this presentation is Adam Jackson with ESC Spectrum. Adam is the business development coordinator with ESC. Say hello, Adam.
Hey everybody, this is Adam Jackson. I'm based out of Houston. I'm a business development manager for ESC Spectrum. I got a background in controls, started off with controls and programming in my career and transitioned into CEMS as a plant engineer in the power plant, moving on into doing consulting and DAS audits. And now today we sell CEMS analyzers, probes, parts, components, and we are the largest DAS vendor in the United States. Thanks, Steve.
You're welcome, Adam. Both Adam and I have considerable experience with data acquisition systems from regulatory, software, and hardware perspective. We have both done plenty of field work with these systems for many years, and in order to enjoy retirement, we plan to do it for many, many more. We will be asking our participants today to post their questions during the webinar, and we will try to answer as many of them as we can. Adam, as always, do you have anything to add before we start?
Yeah, I would just like to add that I'm going to be monitoring questions. We may not be able to answering them real time, but towards the end of the webinar, we will have a Q&A session where I will go through each individual question and discuss those topics with you. If we can't answer it here, we will reach out to you individually and get you resources and a response to your questions. So go ahead and type them as you come up with them. I see them as we're going through this. And if you have any questions that you don't want to ask here in the forum, you can always send either Steve or me an email.
And we will post our contact information towards the end of this presentation. With that, let's go ahead and kick off part 2, role of the DAS and some best practices. First, an overview of our respective companies. ESC Spectrum, Adam's company, is based in Austin, and ESC Spectrum provides the most widely used CEMS DAS software in the United States. The DAS is the market leader in helping industrial and utility plants comply with federal, state, and local air quality regs requiring continuous monitoring. Their professional CEMS services provide expert integration, maintenance, repairs, training, stack testing, and more. The software's name is Stackvision. With regard to my company, Trinity, since their founding in '74, Trinity has expanded, and I do mean expanded, their geographic footprint and breadth of services. We attribute our continued growth to a focus on cornerstone values of top-notch techno performance and excellence in client service. Our motto is our solutions are delivered uncommonly well. We are local everywhere, meaning we pretty much have offices in every state out there. Exceptional quality. We respond to our customers. We want to give them value. We're passionate about our customer service. We maintain our ISO certification for continuous improvement and consistency. Any of the consultants that we have on staff, we hire them through rigorous recruiting and professional development standards. Our professionalism is unmatched. And when we left off on part 1, we were, of course, talking about the data acquisition and handling system, your DAS, that it collects and manages data from many continuous monitoring systems where applicable. And your CMS, your continuous monitoring system can consist of an emissions monitoring system, a parametric monitoring system, an opacity monitoring system, a particulate monitoring system, all that going to one central location. Your DAS is not just the logger, it's not just the PLC, it's not the data controller, it's not just the black box. Your data validation, your equations, your averaging, whatever that looks like, they happen in the DAS as collected in real time, not later in spreadsheets. And your alarms, your signals, your data, your IO are available on a real-time basis. As part of your system,
Steve,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to add here that the difference between DOS and DOS, we get that question all the time. So you can see there's two different terminologies here. There's DAS versus DAHS. Those are the same things, and they've been used interchangeably throughout the years. The H stands for handling, so data acquisition and handling system. They're the same thing. And so I just wanted to point that out. If anybody has any questions or were confused why there's two different letter organizations there.
Okay, great. We were talking about real-time data collection that comes to your data controller in the form of your I/O, your digital inputs and outputs, your analog inputs. All that is being collected at your data controller, at your PLC, at the black box, and we will utilize that information as constituents to downstream calculations for creating your emission rates, for your mass emission summaries, block averages, rolling averages, what have you, for the regulations that affect you. That's all programmed within your DAS server software and controller hardware. So welcome now to a daily dose of DAS. Now previously, we had talked about our daily routine, and this is just a recap from last week's webinar, part 1, where on a daily basis, we believe that as a best practice, you should be examining your alarms, that you should be examining and verifying the nature of your daily calibrations where applicable. You should be examining your hourly data for both value and status to look for any anomalies, anything that looks a little out of the ordinary. You should be examining for any communication glitches, any hiccups. If, for example, you have an hourly average that looks a little weird, you may have to drill down and find out what all went into that hourly average. See if you have any missing data. See if historical recovery is available for any missing information, if that's the case. You should be checking your due dates on your certification, recertification testing, those things you have to get in as a result of the quarter or semi-annual. Any recent test results that have been done, have they been input into the system? Have they been evaluated? Have they been, I don't know, benchmarked against ECMPS if you're used to evaluating your quarterly reports on an ad hoc basis? You should observe any changes in operations in your hourly data reports. And in general, look for any crazy stuff that just happens, you know? CEMS isn't perfect. CEMS can sometimes glitch on you. CEMS can sometimes, things just happen with CEMS. And they never really announce themselves beforehand. Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, it never does. You're absolutely right. When CEMS goes haywire, it definitely takes a toll on your environmental reporting, the whole process. And so I'd like to point out that each of these daily checks, these things are baked into what's called a CEMS QA/QC plan. So it's not just necessarily maintenance that you're scheduling maintenance tasks out of your maintenance management system. It's these things that are actually regulatory requirements that should be in your CEMS QA/QC plan. So I would encourage everybody listening right now to go back, review their CEMS QA/QC plan, do a gut check, and ensure that you do have daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and all of it's spelled out in a CEMS QA/QC plan. And if you have any questions about CEMS QA/QC plan, I've used Trinity, and Steve is one of the best at putting together CEMS QA/QC plan, so I encourage you to contact him and reach out.
Thank you, Adam. We were talking about crazy stuff. When I first got involved with emissions monitoring, it was explained to me by one of my mentors that you should never be intimidated by your emissions monitoring system. CEMS can smell fear. I know that sounds unusual, but the continuous emissions monitoring system is one of those areas where sometimes you need to be a little smarter than the system. Your monitoring plan reflects your QA plan. Your QA plan reflects the maintenance and operation of the system. You should be able to lay your hands on all the components identified in both publications and see that serial numbers match. You should be able to lay hands on them and see that span values match, that maintenance is being done on them on a regular basis, that you have daily and weekly and monthly and quarterly and annual and semi-annual walk down maintenance sheets, whatever was identified, in your monitoring plan and QA/QC plan and perform those like you're supposed to. This makes the fear go away. So let's start with our alarms. And this is the morning check. What alarms have occurred? Are they informational? Are they crucial? Are they just a nuisance? They need to be reprogrammed. We had talked previously that important alarms should probably be latched, meaning that they stay on screen even after they're acknowledged until a situation is corrected. If you have an alarm history report available with your handling system, you should probably be reviewing it. If everything is going according to plan, most of those alarms will be acknowledged and returned to normal. You should follow up on those alarms as needed. And really just as a gut check, once again, are your alarms performing as expected? Are they giving you the information that you want on a timely basis? Are they having the effect that they're supposed to?
I'd
And
like
this is
to
just
point out here. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
no, feel free.
Yeah, I'd like to point out in the control room, I've seen two different environments. I'm sure you've seen this too, Steve, being in power generation, that if your alarm is enunciating in what I'd like to call lighted up like Christmas tree with commingling operational alarms, you might get lost and you might have nuisance alarms that desensitizes you to the environmental alarms. So that's one scenario I've seen. The other scenario is where you have a dedicated DOS screen that lights up at you. It's unique, it's individual, and you can quickly see that you do have emissions monitoring problems. And so I encourage folks to really review how the control room is set up. Can you see the CEMS alarms? Do you have nuisance alarms from the CEMS commingled in operational alarms that could keep you in a desensitized situation to where you might miss something and actually cause an exceedance or an emissions problem?
And that is
Thank
a
you.
valid point. You can have so many alarms on the screen that it can just create a form of blindness to a problem that could be right in front of your face. Taking a look at all these alarms here, every single one of them seem to be valid, but you know, the scheduled blowbacks are disabled. Yes, we need to know about that. Our inlet daily scheduled cows are disabled. Yes, we need to know about that. Every single alarm on this report looks valid, but is it? We don't know until we actually examine the system and find out, okay, what was the intent of this alarm? What is it telling me? Is it genuine? Is it still in effect? What's going on with it?
And it's these, that's a great point, Steve. It's these alarms right here. So in your alarm history, if you've got outstanding alarms, it's one of those things that when I used to do DOS audits, it's those things that we find and we mark down and we write down and say, hey, I found an alarm that hasn't been looked at or acknowledged for 6 months. I've seen alarms that have been in the system for over 2 or 3 years in some cases. And so really go through your alarm history and gut check to make sure that you have a control room logbook entry that acknowledged it, and that the CEMS Shack logbook also acknowledged that you acknowledged that alarm. That's what DOS auditors, that's what the EPA is going to be looking for.
It's a very valid statement. Particularly be on the lookout for nuisance alarms, those that just seem to pop up indiscriminately and just go away. Nuisance alarms are those kind of alarms that just get ignored. No, hands down, they are the worst sort of problem where you just have an alarm pop in and go right back out. Something chattering in the system, a bit chattering in the system that is just causing, creating nothing but a nuisance record. Should probably be investigated. We really want calm in this area. Check it for relevance. Every category of alarm, whether it's meant to monitor the process for excess emissions, downtime, informational. Do you really need to know about a downtime alarm if you're offline? You may need to know about it. You may not need to know about it. You certainly want to know about faults. You certainly want to know about changes in your process. You certainly want everything that was programmed to work, but you always need to check the validity of that operation. Should you correct your operational instrumentation or other problems that are creating that alarms? Verify that your alarm cleared. recalculate any hourly data that may be affected by the alarm, generally because of a status flag that was associated with it. See if it's actually genuine. See if it's actually meant to cause validation issues because of its relevance.
Here on these excess emissions alarms, it's not just the alarms itself and when the alarms happen, but check your DOS to make sure you have stages that will provide you ample warning that you can back off operationally to prevent an excess emissions. And so DOS can be programmed to do a yellow, an orange, a red, and have different stages to say, if I don't make an action today or right now in this operational environment, I could have an exceedance in the hour or a rolling average if that's what you're trying to comply with. So alarms can be set up in any kind of combination, make them work for you and make them work for your operators so they can see the information real time so they can do the decisions that they need to make to back off prior to an excess emissions happening.
As a very basic example, if you have an emission limit based on a 3-hour or an 8-hour or a 24-hour rolling average based on the exceedance of an analog value, an analog level, some number, then more than likely it would be to your advantage to know about that when it happens on an hourly basis, anytime you exceed that number, so that your operations or controls group can take action and mitigate any further exceedances from occurring. It's just an example. When you do have to acknowledge your alarms, in certain instances, you have to apply both reason and action codes for it. You would use these appropriate RA codes for applicable downtime alarms. Also, coding your excess emission, your exceedance alarms, whether those happen on a 1 minute, 6 minute, hourly basis, what have you. And because you are doing this as a manual process, you should probably update the logbook that you have edited the status of the data, the reason action codes to the data, because your logbooks aren't just for maintenance activities anymore.
I think we need to update our PowerPoint here, Steve. I think the second bullet point for update the logbook needs to have about 5 more exclamation marks at the end of this. It's this piece right here that is the lowest hanging fruit, in my opinion, when a DOS auditor is looking to find a violation in your CEMS and DOS system. It's the logbooks don't match. And so I've been to several facilities where they've got control room logbook, they've got the CEMS Shack logbook, they've got electronic logbooks, and they've also got logs sitting in the maintenance management system where stuff did not match across the board, or information for CEMS only occurred in one of those logbooks and not necessarily in the CEMS Shack logbook. So make sure your logbooks are up to date and that you're addressing these alarms in real time, because if I'm coming to audit your system, I'm going to look at the time code for that particular alarm and I'm going to gauge your response based on your logbook entries.
That's very true. Auditors like seeing the logbooks getting used. They like knowing that you're looking at your equipment on a regular basis, even if it's nothing but a shelter visit. That someone is going there, putting a date and time when they visited the shelter, what they did, if it was just checking indicators to make certain everything was good. The auditors like knowing that the maintenance log, the shelter log, is being kept up to date on a regular basis. Checking your calibrations, validating them. Your calibration checks, of course, can be scheduled in your data acquisition system. They can be automated by your data controller, your PLC, the black box. They can also be alarmed and reported on. Depending on the nature of your DAS software, it may allow you to maintain a reference gas cylinder inventory and manage that, manage your bottle count and availability within your system. Just kind of a nice thing to have.
Out in the field, failed calibrations is probably the most common thing we would see, and those calibrations can fail for many number of reasons. And so in your routine, if we see as a DOS auditor a failed calibration, immediately I'm going to be looking for evidence that you troubleshooted from a maintenance perspective, from a regulatory perspective, and I'm going to try to find the entries in the logbooks that go along with the failed calibrations, because the failed calibrations, that's how you can get out of control quickly if you don't address it. The other thing you might want to check in your DOS is to make sure your calibrations and the schedule for when the calibration is being performed matches your permit and also the subpart that you're applicable to. So subpart 60, part 60, part 75 have different calibration routines. They have different requirements. Part 60 is 24 hours, part 75 is every 26 hours. And so the DOS can be set up to do those things, but I've seen it so many times where calibrations were set up as a one-stop shop, and it really wasn't addressing the regulatory requirements the way it should.
That's a good point. I know that in the beginning, everybody starts off with just an automated daily cal. It goes off at, in an ideal world, it goes off the same time every day. But in this day and age, you have the capability where your black box should be able to detect a first fire of the unit, and within a set number of time, start a cal so you can protect your data. Get it in there, get everything validated. Hopefully there was no problems with it, that you had enough bottle pressure in there, so the analyzer has been maintained properly. You don't have any leaks in the system to try and overcome, and your cal is passed, and your data is validated, and life can go on.
And the last part of this routine is if you're going into a weekend, you need to understand what your gas pressure is and what the minimum requirement is for your facility to do these cals. Because the last thing you want is to go into a weekend on the margin. Let's say your requirement's 150 pounds of pressure in the cylinder, and you went into the weekend at 165. You could theoretically drop below, especially if it's a Memorial Day weekend with low staff, with a cylinder that might be out of compliance doing these calibrations and can cause some trouble. So make sure you check the pressures, swap out where possible, give yourself some headroom, especially on weekends or holidays.
And we've talked about this in the past. Most vendors recognize that once your bottle pressure gets below 150 PSI, they will tell you, we don't consider our bottles reliable below 150 PSI. I know a few of them that will tell you to be extremely wary about them at 200. So going into a weekend, if you're getting ready to go off on a 4-day and it's Friday, it's a good mid-morning check to do, just for peace of mind. You do not want to have to get a call out at 2 o'clock in the morning because of an empty bottle. That's just wrong. Getting back to our calibration checks and validations, you want to review the calibration report. Obviously, did my analyzer pass? Am I OOC? Am I out of control? Trend the calibrations for the last 7 to 10 days and see if you are inching your way towards an out of control condition. Perform the required maintenance that is necessary for your analyzers to calibrate properly and perform properly. Verify that you are out of control under the regulations that affect you, because Part 60 and Part 75 cal pass-fail criteria are very different from each other. Did the calibration occur during unit operation, or was it offline? If it occurred offline and your unit is operating now and you're not seeing anything in the report that said a cal occurred while you were operating, it might not be such a bad idea to, ask the techs to go out there and punch the button, run a cal, just to see. I know Adam and I have seen plenty of instances where calibrations can run decidedly different as to when the unit is operational versus when it's offline. Things sometimes shift, sometimes get a little quirky between unit operation and non-operation. And most importantly, perform all of the daily calibration checks. Your stack flow monitor doesn't just have a calibration sequence to run through, it also has an interference check to perform. That's part 75 rule right there. Continuous mercury monitoring. You have not only a calibration, but an integrity check to perform as well.
And this trending towards out of control, there's different performance specifications for the parts on calibration. So part 60, part 75, other parts might have a certain percentage of calibration drift that if you're approaching a certain number, you have to do maintenance activity. So it is a regulatory requirement. So what I started looking for in DOS audits was, does the site have an independent tracker? Is there a historian, or are they putting in an Excel spreadsheet that shows them that if they're at a certain number, they take action, and don't let it get close to the performance specification?
Yes, there are DAS systems out there that will actually offer up a graphical display of calibrations trending, a trend history report. It will actually demonstrate what your cows have looked like over a defined period. So you can actually see if you're inching up or inching down towards pass fail, towards failure of the cow. Are your techs adjusting offset, slope and offset on the analyzer? Are they trying to overcome something? Are they doing maintenance, or are they just trying to make the cow pass? Usually a trend history report can demonstrate what's going on out there. This is an example of a calibration report in the Stackvision software, I believe. You can just kind of look at it from start date and end date, plan associated with it, multiple sources associated with the facility, and the parameters themselves. 0, the span, the cal results, did you pass, did you fail? In certain instances, you can actually have the cylinder reference information, the same information that you would have on a certificate of analysis associated with the report. Particularly if it's a protocol bottle, you would want that on your reports.
And I would like to note that if you ever see 99,999 on your calibration error report, you should probably call your CEMS consultant or DOS provider immediately.
Ooh, that's a trick question, isn't it? Does that mean there was a communication glitch?
It could be, yeah. So I was looking at those numbers, and that right there is the trend for trending upwards towards your performance specs. So you can see the limit on that chart was 5. You can see that very first day on NOx is 1.8. So this is the number for cal error that you would actually look for to see if you're going to go up against the cal limit. So at 1.8, I'd probably start doing some checks. If you get to 2, then you really want to go out in the field and see what's going on. Why is that response? But it's that number that's trending upwards. But once you get to 7, you're out of spec, and then certainly 24,000, you're in trouble.
Yeah, I think that's just the reporting engine's way of pointing out to you, is kind of waving at you and saying, hey, I've got a big problem here. So as far as the rest of the routine, do you have any test dates coming up? Any deadlines? Have the cylinder gas audits been performed? Have linearities been performed if you're part 75? When's your RATA due? What quarter are you supposed to run it? Are you due to perform a fuel flow meter accuracy test, a primary element inspection, or a transmitter transducer accuracy test on your fuel flow meter? Do you know when your Appendix E or low mass emitter testing is due, if you qualify for those particular programs? Do you have any periodic testing or maintenance due on your opacity monitor? Those can sneak up on you. Any quarterly performance test, any site-specific reportable testing, anything under the permit, under the consent decree. What do you have to do to make the state or the Fed happy in the form of certification or recertification testing? When are the due dates? Do you know them actively?
There are certain grace periods associated with some of these tests, and it's in your best interest to go through and create a chart and I did this when I worked in the plant, so I don't have to remember it, is if you have a grace period for, say, linearity or errata, to understand that, because problems do happen, things do happen, and it's a great reference point to know that if there's a grace period, you can plan accordingly to go fix the issue. And the other thing is in Part 75, I'm seeing a lot more petitions to the EPA for utilizing Coriolis-style meters for fuel flow monitoring. So if you're going to be doing the QA checks and the tests, you need to understand whether or not your site has any petitions out to the EPA, and they've elected to use a different type of technology that might not necessarily be spelled out in the regs.
That's a good observation, and this is a decent side note that we are in a pandemic situation right now where a lot of things are going, a lot of recertification testing is going to be delayed for probably the majority of facilities out there. We've seen multiple instances already where notification letters are being offered for recertification test delays. People are having to file petitions. They can use letter templates. The state wants to work. They want to know how many facilities are going to be delaying testing. You can't just sit back and expect them to know that you're going to be delayed. You have to be in contact with them and let them know point blank, in some instances, which tests are going to be delayed and when were they supposed to be due.
Great,
Part 75
great point,
notification
Steve.
letters. Yeah, the Part 75 notification letters that came out from the conference call with the Clean Air Markets Division. EPA has posted templates, a form letter, essentially, that can handle single facilities, but multiple units, talking about, what type of test is it? When was its due date? When do you anticipate being able to get it done? It can take you about 15 minutes to fill one of these out, just for a single unit, and you can submit it electronically to a blind mailbox at EPA and you're done. But that's just one example. Other states are handling them on an ad hoc basis, getting in touch with your analysts, letting them know, I can't do this because of COVID. Be prepared to explain to them why in writing it's not going to happen at a regular date and time.
Yeah, these are unprecedented times. This is not anything I've seen in my CEMS career where there is a global event that's affecting our ability to go do these types of tests, the CGAs, linearities, the RADAs. And so I'd like to point out that both of our companies, Trinity and ESC Spectrum, are tracking the ECMPS regs. Trinity is a great source of reg tracking. If you go to their website, you can take a look at updates. You can come to ESC Spectrum and Envirosys.com's website, take a look at the updates. So if you think your facility is going to be impacted because of the pandemic, then please give us a call. We can help you navigate some of these forms and help you prevent an issue of getting out of control data moving forward. It's a simple process, just like Steve pointed out. It's a few forms, but sometimes you might need to navigate through that a little bit, and we can definitely help.
Thanks, Adam. Some helpful tips for a DAS kind of day. As an efficiency measure, schedule your reports. If your DAS has the capability of doing this, and most of them do in the 21st century, you should schedule your reports to print or email in the morning. And spend a few minutes a day on quick checks. You should be doing at least weekly data reviews. Review and validate your data. Make every status flag make sense. You can build screens, construct some saved views, graphical displays, reports of what you need to see. This is your system. You own it. You might as well take advantage of it. Build some screens, build some good solid reports, get some help on how to do either. No one has to do this alone. What you need to see on a daily basis to make certain you have the tools to get your DAS day done, so you can get onto that second cup of coffee that you need. Make your checklists. They're meant to be dynamic. Checklists are meant to be dynamic. Keep them updated. Change them when you need to. They're yours. Here's a nice example for a daily dose of DAS. Check your communications and polling of the system. Are we collecting my real-time information when I'm supposed to? What's the status look like? It's all, all of my data records full. What do my alarms look like? Let me check the history report. Let me make certain everything's acknowledged. And those that are unacknowledged, I understand why. Something unique to Stackvision, you're reviewing Process Now, your Process Now history report. These are the jobs that are performed in the Stackvision system. Your daily Process Now tasks completed without error. And if it does have any errors, troubleshoot them, or get the techs to do it for you, or get vendor support to do it for you. Review your data, an average data report, some custom linked reports. Check out Data Lab and the charts associated with it, your customized views. Check your downtime reports, check for any exceedances. Edit the reason and action codes where you need to. Check your calibrations, run up a detail report, run through Cal Lab, make certain all the checks that you needed are complete. And if you're a coal site, look for that interference check. If you're having to monitor mercury, look for that integrity check. Your stack flow cal and your interference check, your mercury monitor cal and the integrity check, those are meant to go through as a pair every time you calibrate. Check your recertification dates, your quarterlies, your annuals, when are they due? Any certification event records. Those that required you to submit an event record. And this is also a Part 75 thing, that if you performed certain activities, you had to perform certain recertification tests associated with them as well. You would have an event code, you'd have a test code. You would have a date and time that the event started. You would have a conditional validation date when that first provisional cal was performed after maintenance was completed. And you have a date and time when the event ended. That is a completion of an event record. Did you have to do a recertification test under Part 75 rules, or just a diagnostic test? Generate your reports. They are a wealth of information into your system.
This daily dose is literally daily, and so there's not a lot of things that we do on a daily basis from a regulatory perspective per se. So reporting frequencies may be quarterly, they may be annually, but the dailies for CEMS, it's one of the few things out there where we really do have to look at it daily. And what I'd like to point out is that the daily dose checks might go across multiple departments, and one of those departments is IT. And so IT can be a challenge with backing up the hard drives, backing up their systems, getting the communications online, or even allowing remote access for a consultant. Those are all the things that I do check when I'm in a CEMS system if my backups are working, because the worst thing that can happen to you is to lose your data. So make sure you don't forget about the IT piece.
That is an excellent observation. When we're talking about the DAS itself, all of this is pretty much just the philosophy of managing your system. Adam and I can talk best practices all day long, but your situation could be unique. The things that are not unique about it is that it's still a system that is yours. Crazy stuff can still happen with it, okay? But you have time to deal with it. So breathe. It's just a system. You've got time. You can see it when it happens because we're doing real-time data collection. Keep on breathing, okay? And because you, over time, will have a more than basic understanding of the system, you'll get better at this as time goes on. You can isolate the causes of some of the silly behavior that occurs on a DAS within your CEMS. You can isolate those causes more easily, allowing you to exhale and go on with life.
And part of that exhale and go on with life are the Trinities, the Steves, and I can tell you from real life plant engineer experience where I've had real-time issues. So if you get into a situation where your daily dose of DOS, there's a failure and you just don't know what to do with it, if in doubt, call your consultant, because it's not the end of the world if you do eventually have to talk to the agency. I've done it multiple times in my career. I don't necessarily advocate calling the agency directly. not without the experience of navigating the regs. And that's where the consultant really comes in and can be your advocate on the phone or even in person in some cases when you're dealing with these daily issues. And so if in doubt, call your consultant. It might actually save you a lot of trouble and heartache in the end, because you're going to be dealing with two levels. You'll have a state and you'll have the EPA. So what you really want to do is squash it at the state level and work with your local group. You do not want this getting up into the EPA level and getting into full DAS audit territory. So if in doubt, call your consultant.
So that pretty much brings us to the end of part 2 of our presentation today. This is the SC Spectrum resource and contact info. There's the website, our main resource library, nice publication on staying ahead of the data review game. There's a webinar that everybody should probably get a look at. You can make some general inquiries at that 512 number, and there's Adam's number at the bottom. Remember, if you don't have our phone number, either of our phone numbers handy, keep our email contact information. If you're a little better at expressing your problem in an email, that's fine. Neither Adam or I have any problems answering a question. And there's me, Trinity Consultants. There's a number for me. There's my contact information. And if you're deep into Part 75 like I am, these are just 2 of a slew of publications that I make heavy use of when I'm trying to deal with federal reporting under Part 75. Both of them are excellent reads and have certainly kept me out of trouble over the years.
All right, are you ready to move to the Q&A session, Steve?
Let's move to the Q&A session, Adam.
All right, so we've got some questions that have been asked during the presentation. Got some really good questions here. So we've got a few about monitoring requirements, and we're not going to get into the environmental consulting or regulatory here because we don't know your specific situation at the site, but we've got one that says, shall we use a DOS with flare monitoring analyzers? So this is a hot topic. This is something that as ESC Spectrum, we're actually discussing internally. How do we discuss flares in terms of DOS and CEMS? So if you have a question about that, and you have a question about the regulatory aspects about it, I would highly recommend you contact a Trinity type company, get a consultant, and they can give you the regulatory applicability, and then reach out to your DOS vendor like us, and then we can tell you what the solution looks like. So so if you've got a flare and you have a question, does this flare need to be monitored? Reach out to us. We can help evaluate that. We've got another question here. How to report plant upsets in DOS, like shutdown where you have emissions issues. And so this comes back to the coding. So if you go through your emissions events, I recommend, this is just my recommendation, that you do it at least weekly. I had a consultant come in monthly to check my weekly work and make sure that those codes are entered properly. So our DOS Stackvision allows you to do that very easily. Multiple DOSs out there do. If you have an emissions event, something happened, maintenance upset, outage, downtime, you can code that stuff, and it's those codes that will save you in the end if you get audited and somebody asks what happened with this. And you don't want to back up a whole bunch of months worth of codes. I can tell you this from real life experience, that once you get to reporting season, you don't want to have to go back through 3 months worth of data and historical representation, trying to put notes and everything together from a CEMS logbook, operational logbook, just to get that report out, and sometimes under pressure. So make sure you're keeping up with that on a regular basis. That's a great question.
Yeah, amen to that. Trying to go back in time on that kind of stuff is just an accident waiting to happen. And also, don't confuse your monitor downtime alarms with your opacity downtime alarms. Because opacity still exists under state administration, sometimes reason and action codes can vary between what you would code to a gas monitor versus what you would have on an opacity monitor. The two can be mutually exclusive.
That is a great point. Yeah, sometimes the codes aren't always the same, depending upon where your plant is located. So this is a great question, and this is something I've never been asked before, but does the logbook, and we're gonna assume for the context of this question, the CEMS logbook, allow entry of maintenance work that does not result in downtime? Here's what I'm going to say about CEMS logs. The more you put in there, the better. because even the things that don't result in downtime over time can reveal a trend that did lead to downtime. And a real life example is we had some cylinder numbers that weren't being propagated to the DOS properly, and we could not figure it out. And it was simply because the operator was entering the cylinder numbers at the actual analyzer itself, and it wasn't pushing them to the DOS. Only way we figured that out was it was in the entry book. He put it in like clockwork. I entered cylinder number right here at the panel. And so stuff like that can help save you in the end, and also gives you the context and due diligence, which is very key, that you are keeping up with your system. So that time that you do have a maintenance downtime or a CEMS failure, but you have all these other records of the things you did right written down in your CEMS logbook, it can look a lot better for your scenario if you do run into a regulatory problem.
All right, whether it
That's a great
results in
question.
downtime or not is irrelevant. Really, you want to just be totally transparent about what you're doing in the shelter, period. You know, going in to do just a routine check, that doesn't result in any downtime, but it's still a good thing to provide that information to demonstrate that the equipment is being visited on a regular basis for issues.
That's right. And it's those logbook entries is really the only way we can verify through a DOS audit that you are doing what the CEMS QA/QC plan that you have written for yourself is dictating from a regulatory perspective that you're in compliance. So that logbook is crucial. So great question. Let's move on to the recommendations for electronic logbooks versus hard copy logbooks. So I saw a shift maybe 5 years ago, Steve, you might attest to this, where control rooms were shifting to a global electronic logbook system, encoding the CEMS appropriately in the electronic logbooks. There's no right or wrong way to do this. You can do electronic logbook in our platform, Stackvision, which works great. You can do it in your maintenance management system. I still advocate to some degree that you do need to keep the hard copy records. And it's not just a matter of compliance, but it's a matter of culture. And so you want to make sure that it's easy, accessible. And what I've found with the electronic logs is it might not be universally accessible to the folks who are actually doing the jobs, and you're doing second party communication. So CEMS tech comes to control room, tells control room operator, hey, I did so and so. Can you enter this into the electronic logbook? And you might not get all the accurate information in there. So if it was me, best practice, keep that hard copy regardless, and just make sure you're making checks against the hard copy to the electronic logbook so that we don't have two different records.
And for those of you that are keeping strictly an electronic version of a log on the server, I'm going to caveat it with this. Your ability to retain that information is only as good as your last backup. So if it is being stored within your DAS, it is my sincere hope that you're doing routine backups on that server on a very regular basis. My former employer, we were doing full server backups once a week and differential backups every day for all of our systems, all of our DAS servers. We did have, in certain instances, we allowed the technicians to decide if they wanted to keep hard copy or electronic copies, and we never really had a problem with that, simply because of our backup scenario on that. Flip side of that is that you don't have to do a backup on a hard copy logbook. So take your pick.
True. And the hard copy logbooks have saved me in other types of audits that had nothing to do with CEMS. So power generation folks on the phone right now will know the term NERC. And so I was the NERC compliance person, and I relied heavily on the CEMS logbooks for demonstrating compliance with NERC. So it's not just CEMS that you're worried about. That data can be used universally in many different regulatory platforms to demonstrate compliance. Let's see, we've got a couple more statements here. We've got some questions about online training for support and preparing QA/QC plans for the CEMS at your site. And so here's what I'm going to say about this. I'm going to pass this over to you, Steve, but Trinity Consultants has several online training platforms. You go to their website, you can sign up for these things. They have often posted classes that are consistent with developing CEMS QA/QC plans. I used to develop those myself. I've also been trained by Trinity. It's fantastic training. Steve, do you guys have a QA/QC plan class coming up anytime in the future online?
Not certain. I would really have to look. I do know that if you go to the training link on Trinity's website, I believe you can actually search for the phrase QA/QC, and it would point it out. Beyond that, if you're still unsatisfied, you cannot find what you're looking for, your search terms don't make any sense, you can contact any of our business developers within Trinity, and they can do some of the legwork there for you. That's really all I can say about that at this time.
And as a result of these types of comments, I get that question all the time for CEMS QA/QC. So ESC Spectrum, we're not a regulatory company from a consulting perspective, but we do work with companies like Trinity to provide those type of services when those questions are asked. So Steve and I might put our heads together and we may come up with a QA/QC plan webinar sometime in the near future. So that's a great point, great question. Let's see here. Do we got anything else? Are these slides going to be available for us to download? Yes. So you will have access to this after this presentation. We'll make sure everybody gets the link. You can go view it, go review it. And if you have any questions that you didn't think of here, you can have Steve's email and my email on speed dial, and you can send us an email. I would ask you to copy both of us so that way we both see your questions. If you have something specific you want to ask Steve or me, you can do that as well. Let's see here. We got a few more. I think we're running up against the clock here. And we've got a comment here about CEMS text and data entry into the log. And so if you do have an electronic log system, encourage your CEMS techs to do the data entry themselves. They know best. They're the ones that are out there touching the equipment. They know what the terminology is. And encourage them to do it real time. And sometimes that's not possible because CEMS is an outside job. You're going to be going into the shack. You're going to be doing your maintenance, but you need to take that data back somehow into the electronic logbooks. There's a couple of ways to solve that. You can actually have the electronic logbooks in the CEMS shack, add another computer station there so it's ease of use, or make sure they take notes and bring it back to the control room. I typically add CEMS to the daily kickoff, and maybe everybody doesn't do that, but we had 2 meetings a day where we had shift changeover. Just simply add CEMS to that shift changeover and talk about the daily events and then capture that in the electronic logbooks. So I think that wraps up the questions, Steve. Thank everybody for the time. And Steve, I'll pass it back to you.
Okay. Thanks everybody for tuning in to part 2. Adam and I will probably get back together here in several weeks for another webinar. We will post it out there for everyone to see. I believe our next webinar sometime in June regarding monitoring plan contents.
That is correct.
And we will try and throw in some sound effects to make it sound a little more exciting than it is. But having said that, on behalf of Trinity Consultants, my name is Steve Argabright. My colleague, Mr. Adam Jackson with Environmental Systems Corporation. Thank you all very much for coming out today and listening to us. And we'll be talking with you again, hopefully, very, very soon. Good day, everyone.